Edmonton's past. Along with other presenters here this morning, the Heritage Council affirms the importance of West Rossdale lands to Edmonton's history and identity. Both built heritage, such as the Rossdale Generating Station, and its past uses and connections to the place, which might be called intangible heritage. But that's a term that greatly underestimates the cultural importance to present-day Edmontonians and others for that site. These lands are important to Edmonton and Alberta's identity, far more than any other place in the city. And the Heritage Council has recognized this in its discussions and for consequences. Rossdale really is a nexus of the history of Edmonton. Edmonton was born on that site 200 years ago. It had been a crossing point for Aboriginal peoples for millennia before. Mr. Goodstriker mentions 8,000 years. I think that's a conservative estimate. It could be much longer than that. From there, the province of Alberta was inaugurated on that site. We've had a number of sports teams on that site, and we've also had a number of gatherings. Northlands actually held its first exhibitions down on Rossdale. Also, given the Year of Reconciliation recently announced during the Truth and Reconciliation event, this is an ideal place for this historical and cultural importance to be visibly manifest and permeate through its redevelopment. It is a unique opportunity for multi-generational city building, which is essential to making a good long-term investment. The Heritage Council is pleased to see the scope of today's report and bringing together the different components and aspects of the site. That being noted, the River Valley Access Project discussion pushes this scope. Clarity in relation to these is very important. These developments and economic implications increase the complexity of redevelopment, and this often means that the cultural value is overlooked or undervalued, even if paid lip service in its importance. Usually this kind of anticipated redevelopment calls in heritage and public arts proponents late in the game, after concrete is poured, and so we're concerned that given multiple projects under unclear timelines, this may be the case again. Understanding the timelines and the key deliverables of this project is very important. Ongoing community engagement, as identified in the report, will be essential, and the Heritage Council requests to be an active part of that engagement. The Heritage Council anticipates greater involvement through whichever governance approach is followed by enhancing and pushing the thinking on the historical and heritage importance of the site to ensure that the legacy is respected and acknowledged. This is not a single-minded pursuit. This will ultimately increase the attractiveness and connection to the people, to the neighborhood, as well as other related developments. In considering about how the layered history of this place will enhance the cultural and financial viability of redevelopment, the Edmonton Heritage Council doesn't come with any preconceived notions of what this means, whether it's through dedicated public spaces, physical or virtual interpretation, or active programming. All of these and more need to be considered as a continuing part of the planning going forward. Finally, though the Heritage Council hasn't developed precise details, the West Rossdale development would be an opportunity, if there was one, to institute a percent for heritage policy that affirms and ensures that in the same way the percent for public art policy, the importance of West Rossdale's history in expressing the character, attractiveness, and identity of the city. Just as public art is considered a key component of attractiveness and identity in the city, as well as a major mark of character on a community, an investment that strengthens the whole, the prominence and attention paid to heritage would also be an important mark of the success of this redevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Delorme.
Good morning. Article 11 of the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People provides, Indigenous people have the right to practice and revitalize their culture, traditions, and customs. This includes the right to maintain, protect, and develop the past, present, and future manifestation of their culture, such as archaeological and historical sites, artifacts, designs, ceremonies, technology, and visual performing arts and literature. States shall provide redress through effective mechanisms, which will include restitution, development in conjunction with Indigenous people with respect to their culture, intellectual, religious, spiritual property taken without their free, prior, and informed consent, or in violation of their laws, traditions, and customs. There are certain individuals from the City of Edmonton, whether they're still employed or with the city or not, with certain individuals with the province have ignored the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. This discrimination has to stop. There is also individuals, whether they're former employees or still employed with the city, such as managers, directors, city councillors, even mayors, who have made decisions in regards to the desecration, a known historical grave area, who has also broken the peace treaties that our families have agreed to. This is going back to when the first ancestors was ripped out of their resting place well over 100 years now, and still continues to this day. We've always held our side of the treaties, as long as the sun shines and the river flows. Genocide. Article 2. This convention defines genocide as the following acts committed with an intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, such as killing members of the group, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life, calculated being about the physical destruction, whole and in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Our children have been taken away. Our sacred sites and graves have been desecrated. These years have shown that there was intent to destroy our heritage. On May 22nd, 2008, I'd asked the City of Edmonton to make Rossdale a historical site, which in turn, this individual is no longer with the city, failed to follow council's direction. This fell through the cracks once again, which still to this day nothing's being done. Once again, this discrimination is prevalent. I've also been asking these questions to many individuals over the many years now that do have the power to make decisions, which to this date still go unanswered. I do expect the following questions answered today. Some questions also go out to the owners of these development companies who want to develop on a known historical grave area. When is it right to abuse a child? When is it right to abuse an elder? When is it right to abuse a sacred site? When is it right to abuse graves? I expect these answered. I've also asked for title to the lands which the Hudson's Bay took. So far, the city has not provided the title to the lands. The Supreme Court of Canada, in their ruling in 1997, state that title to Canada is still in the hands of the original peoples. This idea of being a PNN is not accurate whatsoever either. Talking to researchers from Enoch, Sampson, and Mountain Creek, the term has never been used in the Edmonton area. The very first forts were up at Fort Saskatchewan, which may be interpretation where the name PNN was used. This would also entail people that don't know the size of area of Rossdale. I'm going to make a declaration today to outline our sacred site, one of our sacred sites in the City of Edmonton. From east of Telesfield, west to the least, north to the North Kenora Club. From 97th Avenue south to the riverbank is a sacred site. It has always been. The bones of our ancestors have been scattered all over the site for many years, turning them into dust. This site is just as sacred as any other site or ceremony or cemetery in the city. This will also include the many bodies that were ripped out of the resting place in 1976 and dumped in a landfill at the old Rabbit Hill sand pit, which now has a Twilliger center on top. There's only two sides of history one can be on, the right side or the wrong side. Which side will you choose? I know which side I'm on. Our families are not out just creating out people's cemeteries or sacred sites. When will our graves and sacred sites receive the same dignity and protection as everyone else's graves? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fair?
Thank you for the opportunity to provide input into the Rossdale reports before the committee. The